By now, I'm sure many of you watched the video that I made sort of parodying the Watch Mojo video posted about Seto Kaiba's best monsters in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. My video didn't quite do what that original video did, because the original video posted by Watch Mojo was about which cards were most impactful for Kaiba in the anime. And while that's fine, I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to look at competitive Yu-Gi-Oh from a standpoint of all of Kaiba's cards. So what I did is I went through and looked at all of the monster cards that Kaiba played, because the Watch Mojo video was about monster cards only, and I talked about which cards that Kaiba played were actually competitively viable in the TCG. And when I did that, maybe I didn't make it quite as clear as I could have that I was only talking about monster cards. The reason I did that though is twofold. The first reason is that I just wanted to sort of piggyback off of what Watch Mojo did, and I didn't think that I would want to switch it up too much. But the second reason, as we'll find out in this video, is that Kaiba played so many ridiculously broken spells and traps that if I talked about those cards in that last videos, I'm not sure we would have had any time to talk about monster cards. In today's video, I'm not even going to number it. We're just going to go through many of the broken spells and traps that Kaiba played over the course of the anime. And just like last time, we're focusing on these anime cards that Kaiba played, but not how good they were in the anime, but rather how good they were in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh TCG. So as far as I know, all of these cards were used by Seto Kaiba himself. They weren't used by a computer or an imitator. These are all cards that Kaiba had in his decks that he activated in duels, and we're going to talk about them in relation to how strong they were in the TCG. The first category of broken cards that I want to talk about are four sort of original Yu-Gi-Oh cards that we saw in many players' decks of that time, and it's funny looking at these cards because these cards are a lot better than some of the monster cards that we saw in Kaiba's decks, and it's only just scratching the surface, because when you go back and watch the original series duels, a lot of times these spells and traps are the real power play makers, not so much the monster cards, which is very similar to how old school Yu-Gi-Oh just in general was played. So the first four cards that we're looking at here are Graceful Charity, Pot of Greed, Monsterborn, and Heavy Storm. All four of these cards have been on and off the ban list throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Three of them are still currently banned in the TCG. Monsterborn very recently, I guess a couple formats ago, got unbanned and it's currently limited, but all of these cards were very powerful for their time periods, and they were very powerful for many formats. And it makes sense that Kaiba would use these in the anime, because he's supposed to be someone that has a lot of powerful cards, and at the time that the anime was being played, these cards were very, very powerful. And while those cards were powerful, I think it's worth mentioning here that I think a lot of people in the anime got a chance to use some of those cards. Obviously, Pot of Greed is a big one that we saw time and time again used by many duelists over the series, but generic draw spells and destruction cards weren't all that Kaiba had in terms of banned cards. So we can also look at Dimension Fusion, one of the craziest revival spells ever printed. This thing says pay 2,000 life points and then both players special summon as many of the removed from play monsters as possible. This thing is insane. One of the best cards ever printed by far. I've talked about it in many banned card discussion videos. Even at one copy when this thing was limited, it was still getting abused in decks like Dark Dragon Return and Diamond Dude Turbo, and even more than those two strategies. Overall, this thing is just like a super soul charge. I mean, soul charge is already insane, but Dimension Fusion is pretty crazy because it special summons cards that are banished, which is a little bit harder to get to than the graveyard. There's tons of cards that revive things from the grave, but the banished pile is a little bit harder to get to. It's also only 2,000 life points, not 5,000, even if you're reviving 5 monsters, and then also you don't have to skip your battle phase, which is huge. Dimension Fusion truly is one of the only cards that is currently banned that I can say will probably never ever come back to the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG. It's one of those cards that you basically can't power creep because it just has no restrictions on it and only gets better as more banished cards are added to the game. Speaking of banned cards that probably will never come off the ban list, we have another card that Kaiba used last turn. Now this one isn't a spell card, it is a trap card, and this thing has a bunch of weird rulings surrounding it, as a bunch of instant kills with it. There's so many weird things about last turn as a card. I think that one of the reasons this card actually was banned is just because of how many strange rulings would come up with certain interactions, both on the card that you select to keep and also the card that your opponent special summons from their deck. Kaiba has used some insanely powerful spells and traps, and we're only halfway through the video. The next set of cards that I want to talk about are cards that were very different in the anime versus the TCG, but at least in the TCG they are very powerful and still played in some cases to this day. The first card is Card of Demise. Oh my god, is this card good in the TCG? You have so many draw power effects that are available, but this is one of the best ones. It's commonly played right now in True Dracos and Frog Paleozoics. It's also been played in a variety of stun decks in the past, but in the anime it was even more overpowered board. The anime effect says draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. During your 5th standby phase, which by the way, the game will probably be over at that point, send all cards in your hand to the graveyard. The current iteration of the card lets you only draw 3 cards and has a million other restrictions on it, and yet it is still played. So obviously the anime version would be even crazier, but this is an example, one of the examples that we're going to talk about, where a card gets severely nerfed from the anime counterpart and is still really competitive. The next card is Crush Card Virus, and I don't even know which anime effect to talk about because it seems like there's at least 3 different ones. There's like a spell version of this card. There's one just called Crush Card, but it has the same artwork of Crush Card Virus. There's a lot of different iterations of Crush Card in the anime, and in the TCG, funnily enough, there are also 2 different versions. You have the original prize card version, which was very powerful and played in a variety of decks, and was one of those cards that made a huge difference in old school tournament play, because to win a Crush Card Virus, you had to basically win a tournament, a Shonen Jump Championship. So then when you went to the next one, now you had a huge advantage because you had this extremely powerful, extremely versatile card that your opponents wouldn't have. Because you had that edge, now you had an easier time topping and winning that event, which meant that you had another shot, an easier shot at winning another copy of Crush Card, which you then could either sell or give to a teammate. And that was sort of one of the problems with prize cards being way too powerful. And they didn't really know what they were doing back then, but it was one of the earliest prize cards and was one of the best prize cards ever released. Then the card got banned, and it was banned for a while, and then it came back with a new changed effect. It hasn't seen a ton of play with the new effect. There's a lot more restrictions on it. It's not nearly as powerful, but it has seen some experimentation. But this is one of those cards, one of the best prize cards ever released by far, and it seems to be one of the iconic Kaiba cards, which is really cool to see. One card, and one of the few examples of this where a card actually got significantly better when it moved from the anime to the TCG, is Lullaby of Obedience. In the TCG, this card wasn't the most popular pick, but it was played in a couple formats. It was really popular actually when Speedroid Terratop was at 3 in Zodiac format, and it also saw some play in 2018 as well, when a lot of people were playing similar cards in certain matchups. But in the anime, this card actually was really bad. I mean, extremely lackluster. So it says pay 1,000 life points and declare the card name of a level 8 or higher monster card, which obviously makes it really bad. And then it says if the declared card is in your opponent's deck, add that card from their deck to your hand. 2 big differences here are that it can only call level 8 or higher cards instead of just any monster card, and also your opponent doesn't have the chance to special summon it to your side of the field. Admittedly, in most cases, they wouldn't be doing that anyways, but it's just kind of funny that this card got so much better when released in the TCG. Usually cards in the anime are a lot more broken, a lot less balanced, because they're not getting played by real players, they're only getting played in this particular anime situations. Next up we have Enemy Controller, which I know is sort of like the iconic Duel Links overpowered spell card, one of their original very powerful cards, in a format where they didn't have a lot of other powerful cards. But this card actually saw tons of play in the TCG, not only when it first came out, not only during synchro formats, not only during Xyz formats, but even up until like very recently, people were playing this card in Salmon grades for mirror matches and going second. Overall, this is one of the most versatile quick play spell cards ever released, and really does take great advantage of being a quick play spell card instead of either a normal spell or a trap card. I think quick play spell cards are really hard to balance, but I think Enemy Controller did a fantastic job of that. However, in the anime, it's a little bit different. Actually, a lot of it different, a lot more powerful. So in the anime, you can either pay 1,000 life points, you don't have to tribute a monster or anything, you pay that 1,000 life points and do one of 2 things. You can either destroy a card, which is one of the ways that it was used, or you can take control of an opponent's monster to use it for a tribute summon. So this is really interesting, right? Because in the TCG, you don't have that destruction effect. That would have made this card even better, and you also don't pay life points for the stealing effect if you tribute one of your own monsters, which is a lot more balanced. In the anime, the card has way less restrictions, it's way less balanced, but even with those restrictions and balances put on the card still was very viable in the TCG over the course of pretty much its entire history. The last 2 cards are cards that are just sort of generically good that Kaiba seemed to use multiple times. So we have Ring of Destruction. The anime effect of this card is pretty much identical to the original effect of the physical version. Obviously the card got banned for a while and then came back with a new, worse effect. Now the card is a lot less effective for closing out games, but still it was a very viable card before that change happened, and Kaiba used it in the anime. The last card is the most mild card on this list, and that is Polymerization. So in the anime, Kaiba obviously uses this card to summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon like a million times over the course of many series, and that's perfectly fine, but the card actually has seen competitive success in a variety of fusion decks over the years. In most cases, the decks that were playing fusion monsters did have an archetype version of Polymerization that was a little bit better in some way, shape, or form, but Polymerization collection still saw some play in some rogue decks, things like Prank Kids and Fluffles, and pretty much any deck that was playing fusion monsters that really wanted to summon them consistently was playing at least one copy of Polymerization. I could probably go on and on and on all day about the other cards that Kaiba played in his decks because he just had so many broken spells and traps that were played in the TCG, but I think this video covered most of the big ones, especially the ones that are currently banned or were banned in the past. If you want to check out some of his better monster cards, make sure to check out that last video. I'll put a link or a little calling card thing at the end of this video that you guys can click to check that one out. Otherwise though, I'll see you later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.